My father disciplined my son with his belt, and my wife disciplined my father in the same way, but now she's asking for a divorce because I didn't say anything against my father. We've been married for 7 years, and I loved my wife until she did something unforgivable, something that changed everything. Up until now, the relationship had been good, with everything one could expect from a marriage of this length. We've had disagreements over the years, yes, but they were normal, nothing serious. The only thing that has always caused tension is my parents. My wife doesn't get along with them. They disagree on almost everything, especially on how we raise our son. My parents think she's too soft, that she lets our son manipulate her, and that there's no structure. My wife thinks their parenting style is toxic, controlling, and even bordering on abuse. It's always been a line we've walked carefully. I grew up getting spanked with a belt. That's how I was raised, and that's how I turned out. I often got into trouble, but I learned to endure, not argue, and let it pass. That was the rule: you make a mistake, you get a belt, and move on. There were also good moments, not everything was bad. Still, I think I turned out okay. My wife had a completely different upbringing. Her parents never hit her, not even yelled at her. They talked to her, explained what she did wrong, and tried to help her understand. She doesn't believe in any kind of physical discipline. Although we come from different backgrounds, we've generally agreed on how to raise our son. We talk to him, set boundaries, and sometimes it's harder for me than for her to stay calm. I've raised my voice and lost my patience, but I've never hit him. Our son is 4 years old. He's very active, sometimes wild. Recently, he's developed the habit of hiding things. It's usually harmless: the remote, shoes, small items. He finds it funny, but it can get really frustrating. Last week, my parents were watching him while we ran errands. When we returned, our son was crying. Not just upset, but truly crying. He was sitting on the floor, saying that his bottom and back hurt. My wife asked him what happened. He said, "Grandpa hit me." I didn't know what to say. My father just said that our son had hidden his car keys, and that's why he was late for work. My wife went to pick him up, and he winced in pain when she touched his back. She hugged him and began checking him right there. She asked him if he'd been hit with the belt, and he nodded. She looked at me, then at my father, then at the belt on the chair. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed it and slapped my father with it. Then she threw it on the floor and said, "How does it feel, bastard?" and walked off with our son. I stood there like an idiot. My mother didn't say anything either. I grabbed the keys and went after my wife. She was already in the car, trying to figure out how to settle our son without hurting him more. He couldn't even lie down. In the end, she held him in her arms. We didn't say a single word the whole way back. She whispered to him, telling him he was safe now. I drove, thinking about 1,000 things, none of them useful. When we got home, she took him straight to the bathroom. I sat in the kitchen, not knowing what to do. I could hear her filling the bathtub. I thought about going in, but I didn't. I just waited. Then she came out and told me that he was asleep. I tried to say something, but she didn't let me. She asked me if I thought what my father did was okay. I told her no. I told her I didn't know he would do that. She asked me why I didn't say anything when our son told us. I didn't have a good answer. I said that I disagreed, but I also said that my father shouldn't have hit him. She looked at me as if I were completely lost, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "He hits our son with a belt, and you're worried about how I reacted?" I told her I wasn't justifying what happened, but I didn't think it was all malice. Maybe a little slap now and then isn't the worst, not like my dad did, but something to make the point clear. She shook her head and said that wasn't parenting. That was abuse. I reminded her that we had both agreed not to use physical punishment. But I also told her that our son can be difficult and that maybe my father thought he was doing the right thing. She said, then he should never be near our son again. We continued to argue a bit more. It wasn't even a shouting match. She told me that this wasn't a line that could be crossed once. It was unforgivable. I tried to say that maybe we could talk about it, that my father could apologize or something, but she said she didn't want our son near anyone who thought that was okay. Then she left. She packed a bag, took our son, and left. That was 3 days ago. She blocked my number, and I tried to email her, but nothing. The only message she sent was short and brutal. She said she checked our son again and had to treat him because the wounds were worse than they first appeared. It wasn't just a spanking, it was a beating with a belt all over his body. She said that was enough for her. My parents will never see our son again. So, yeah, that's all. After that message, nothing. I've been thinking about this for days, and I don't know what to do. I don't agree with what my father did. I don't think it's right to hit a 4-year-old with a belt, especially not like that, especially on bare skin. But I also don't know how to accept the idea that my parents can't be with their grandson. They're his grandparents too. That feels huge, like a final decision for something they believed in, and I'm not saying they were right. But something they believed was an acceptable way of parenting. That's how I was raised. These types of things weren't shocking when I was a child. If a child misbehaved, there were consequences. It didn't mean they didn't love me, it was part of raising me. That's how I understood it as a kid. And although I've moved away from that kind of parenting with my own son, I'm not sure if I can look at my father and call him an abuser the way my wife does. It's harsh, yes. He definitely crossed the line. But is it unforgivable? My wife thinks so. She doesn't back down. I've thought about contacting her parents, asking them to talk to her, but I'm not sure how that would go. I don't even know what I'd say. Do you think this is something that can be fixed? I mean, my marriage. But I also need help figuring out how to tell her I don't hate my dad for just trying to help our son. I feel like this has gotten out of control, and it's not fair to me either. To give more context, I called my mom to ask exactly what happened. She said my dad lost his patience. Our son had hidden the car keys, and he had already been late a couple of times that month. So, he panicked and got angry. She said he told him to stop, but by then, he had already hit him. She didn't give many details. She just said they were sorry, that it wasn't meant to hurt him, and they just wanted to teach him a lesson. I asked her if they understood how serious this was. She said yes, but also that she didn't think it was that serious. That really hit me hard. If they don't even understand, how am I supposed to fix this? I'm caught in the middle. My wife is furious and hurt. My parents are confused about why this has turned into what they're calling a family collapse. Part of me thinks maybe we need space, that maybe they shouldn't be around our son for a while. But another part can't stop thinking they're my parents. I can't just erase them from our lives. They love our son. That matters too. But at the same time, my wife isn't wrong. We agreed on how we'd raise our son. From the start, we were clear, no hitting, ever. My parents knew that and chose to ignore it. Worse still, they didn't even call us to tell us what happened. We had to show up and find our son crying to find out. That's not okay. I can't concentrate on work. Every time I think about what happened, I feel sick. I keep replaying the conversation with my wife in the kitchen, thinking about how I handled it. I didn't say the right things. I didn't support her fast enough. I tried to stay in the middle, and all I accomplished was making her feel like I was defending my dad more than our son. Now, I don't even know if she'll come back. I'm not trying to justify what happened. I don't want to raise my son in a house where he's afraid of people who are supposed to love him. But I also don't know how to move forward if it's expected that I cut ties with my own family completely. I've never felt so trapped. I've read things online, people saying, protect your child at all costs and cut toxic people out, even if they're family. But it's not that simple when it's your parents, people who have been in your life your whole life. My wife is in full protection mode right now. I understand and respect that, but I just wish she'd talk to me. I'm not her enemy. I want to fix this. I want us to get back on the same page. So yeah, I don't know where to go from here. Should I try suggesting therapy? Should I tell my parents they need to apologize, not just to her, but fully acknowledge what they did? Should I draw a clear line and say they can't be near our son until they understand? And if they never understand, should I just cut them out? I've never felt so torn between the people who raised me and the family I'm building. Both sides feel like they're asking me to choose. I just wish my wife would come home so we can talk about this. Comments. Your wife defended your son when you didn't. Your father didn't just spank him. He hit a 4-year-old with a belt, so hard it left marks on his back and made him cry from pain, even hours later. That's not discipline, that's plain violence. And you wanted her to apologize? She showed more restraint than most people would. She could have called the police, and honestly, she should have. It's incredible you're framing this as your wife versus your parents, when the truth is your parents crossed a huge line, and your wife is doing what any reasonable parent would do to protect their child. Saying they're not welcome doesn't mean you can't see them again. She's telling you it's not safe for them to be around your son. That's not holding a grudge, that's being a responsible mother. You're focusing on all the wrong things. Your dad hit your son, period. And your response was to defend him and then criticize your wife for being angry about it. You say it's hard because they're your parents, but what about your son and your wife? You say you've never hit your son, so why are you okay with someone else doing it? Someone you trusted to care for him. If it had been anyone else, you'd be furious. But because it was your dad, you're paralyzed. That's the real problem here. I think your wife is the one in the right, and I'll explain why. I think if I were her, I wouldn't have just hit your dad with the belt, I would have used it on you too, for being such a terrible father. And I wouldn't have stopped there. I would have grabbed one of the chairs and broken it over your head so you'd understand what kind of parent you are, letting someone else hit your kid. Not only are you your dad's puppet, but you're also a useless parent. Your son isn't a difficult child. He's just a kid. What he did is typical of children, and at worst, it was your responsibility to discipline him so he wouldn't do it again. But not by hitting him until he's bleeding and needs medical attention, and especially not by your father. What does that say about you as a man, husband, and father? The answer is, not much. Update. I wasn't planning to post again, but some people asked what happened in the end. It's been a few months, so here it is. First, I want to clarify something. I didn't do a good job explaining it last time. My relationship with my dad isn't just about discipline. As a child, yes, I got hit with a belt, but I also had a dad who would come home tired from work and still help me with my homework. He taught me how to fix things around the house. He went to all my school events. He was strict, but he was present. Not just physically, but he was really there. And while I now understand that hitting a child has no place in parenting, I never felt unloved by him. That's what made this situation so hard for me to process. After my wife left with our son, I took some time. Time to really think everything through. I talked to my dad, which was a good conversation. I just asked him directly if he thought what he did was okay. He said no. He said he lost his patience, that it wasn't planned, but when our son laughed about the keys and ran off, something inside him just snapped. He told me he hadn't hit a child in decades, that he thought that part of him was long gone. He said seeing the marks afterward made him feel ashamed. He didn't apologize to my wife immediately, because, in his words, he had too much pride to admit he was wrong in front of her, but he admitted to me that it was wrong. He didn't ask me to defend him. He told me he'd stay away if that's what I thought was necessary, and that he'd understand. That conversation changed something in me, not because I excused him, but because he truly took responsibility. I tried to share that with my wife. I first communicated through her parents. She allowed me to see our son after a few weeks. We met at her parents' house. He was fine, though he didn't say much about what happened. He just said he didn't want to go back to Grandpa's house, and my wife made it clear that she wouldn't change her mind about that. We had some more conversations after that. None of them were easy. I told her what my dad had said, that he acknowledged what he did was wrong, that he wasn't asking for forgiveness, but I didn't want our son to grow up thinking he didn't have a grandpa who loved him. She didn't give in. She said, "My son has no place in the life of someone like your father, someone who hits and manipulates." She said everything he said was just typical repentance from someone who hits and then tries to hide their mistake. I told her I didn't want to completely cut off my family. She responded that she wasn't asking that. She just said they couldn't be around our son. But when I insisted, she told me she didn't trust that I could maintain that boundary over time, that I would let them back in when she wasn't looking. We reached a point where we couldn't move forward. Therapy didn't help. We were too far apart on this issue. She officially moved in with her parents, and I stayed in the apartment. So, yeah, that's where we are. The relationship is basically over. Not just because of this, but because it exposed a difference between us that we'd been avoiding for years, about parenting, boundaries, family. And when the time came, we couldn't find a middle ground we were both comfortable with. I still see my dad, not as often now, partly because I remember that what happened with him ended my marriage. But he's still my dad, and I still love him. My mom isn't the same either. This has affected her a lot. There's guilt floating around, but no one really talks about it. I miss my son every day. When my still wife lets me see him, I try to make it as normal as possible, but nothing is normal. I can't spend time with him like before. We can't have a dinner with my parents all together like we used to. I wish my wife hadn't seen this so drastically, and that we could have reached a middle ground by talking about it. Anyway, I'll fight to stay in my son's life. I'll fight for at least shared custody and to be present in his life like my father was in mine. Comment. How can you still have your father in your life, the one who caused what happened to your son? Not only that, he's also the reason for your divorce. You haven't learned anything. Your point about how you turned out okay because your father disciplined you doesn't hold water. You haven't learned anything. You're a submissive, weak man who lets himself be trampled. One thing is a slap, everyone's been slapped. Another thing is hitting with a belt, as if we were in the slave days. Your dad is a barbarian. There's no possible defense for that. He left a child bleeding and marked. What's odd is that your wife didn't file a police report against your dad. Update 2. My parents had been hiding things from me, like the fact that my wife had filed a report against my father, and he had to spend 12 hours in jail until my mom could get him out on bail with their savings. They didn't plan to tell me because they didn't think it was a big deal. But my wife apparently meant it, because she thinks it was too much. I also think it was. I thought it, but not to the extreme of a police report. If I'd known earlier, I would have been the one asking for the divorce. I'm angry that she acted behind my back and filed a report against my father. She may be angry because she doesn't share the same way of disciplining a child, but this is too much, even for her. Right now, I'm so angry with her that I want to ask for full custody of my son, no matter the cost. I don't care if I lose all my savings in this. I wanted my father to stay away from our son. I was going to do that, but sending him to prison is too much. I'm sorry, but I can't let this go. I'll update as soon as I find out more about my father's options and the rest of what's going on with my wife. Comment. I think you should delete your posts. If your wife finds them justifying the violence against your son, she could use it in the custody case. And there won't be any amount of money that'll save you then. Are you an idiot, or just as bad as your father? Because of you, your wife deleted her posts, and now this won't help her. Not only that, now she won't continue posting, and we won't know more of the story. Post from wife. Hi, this is Lopez's wife, whose father hit my son with a belt until he was injured. My husband told a friend about his posts, and this friend notified me about them. I've been reading his posts, and I don't want to comment too much. We're getting a divorce, and that's enough for me. Evaluating him as a person doesn't make much sense. What I will say is my version of the events. First of all, I knew that my father-in-law had physically disciplined my husband when he was young, but I had no idea it was much worse. This same friend who told me about his posts told me some details my husband had never mentioned, like the fact that once his mom had to take him to the hospital to get stitches in his head after one of these so-called discipline sessions. If I had known about that, I probably never would have left our son alone with my in-laws. I thought my in-laws had just given him a slap or that kind of thing, and we had set clear boundaries that we didn't want any of that with our son. That day, we left him with them and didn't return until the afternoon. We left in the morning before my father-in-law went to work, and then picked him up in the afternoon. When I arrived, I saw my son in a corner with a face.